and welcome everyone. And now I'll start over again. We have a quorum. We'll start a meeting. It is now 7:10. And except for Omar and Louis, everyone is present.
Yep, Omar is here.
Omar's here.
I'm here.
Okay, so except for Louis, everybody's here.
Although he's a picture, not a live video, but that's close enough.
Such is life. Okay, so welcome everyone. We really haven't as a committee met since last May. I surrendered June for whatever reason, and then I surrendered September for whatever reason. So here we are in October, and glad to see everybody. Hope everyone is well and had a healthy summer. I don't know how much you can see of each other, but Kelly is our new member, so I want to say hello to Kelly and welcome her.
Thank you. Happy to be a part of the team. Looking forward to working with everyone.
And her new email address.
And my new email address. Yes, thank you.
Oh, okay. I didn't know you had a new email address, but okay. Welcome.
Thank you.
If I weren't using the screen, I'd ask each of us to say something so we'd all be on the screen together. But I apparently, what we did at the end. So our agenda, which was sent out as an amended one, which I'm amending again, if you all agree. We added this item right here. Come on. The item that came from the Borough President's office. And I'm adding now, if you'll agree to change the agenda, a couple of things I want to report on. And from now on, I'm going to have chairman's report as part of our regular agenda. Is there anyone objecting to changing, to amending the agenda to include item number 2? Hearing none, you're stuck with me. As you may recall from the last board meeting, I interjected what I called was a point of personal privilege. The board calendar has been set up since I was chair, which seems like generations ago, so that the first meeting of the first Wednesday of the month is the executive committee, and the second Tuesday of the month is the board meeting. The objective was, when I set it up, was that there'd be a regular flow. I personally found in the years past that the board meeting and the executive committee was too much alike. So it was just boring to be at the same meeting twice. So the idea at the exec was to bring up issues that would be coming before the committee, before the full board. And then having a problem now with Word again. Shoot. I'm gonna try again in a little while. I'm using my wife's work computer, which apparently was a mistake. The second thing, second issue I wanted to raise, this is very annoying. The second issue I wanted to raise, I don't have my notes in front of me, so now I'm very distressed. Come on. One thing I wanted to bring up, and I will discuss it again at the board meeting, I handed, and we'll talk about it later on. Are you seeing the screen now? Meeting notice?
No, sir, not yet.
No, not yet. Okay. So we'll have to play again. I'm not enjoying this at all. I am not enjoying. Shoot.
Marty, do we really need to share the screen or just leave it up for your own notes?
Well, okay, at this point, tell me, oh, well, hold it, maybe I can do it this time.
Actually, Marty, if you want to email it to me and you could share the screen with me and I'll put it up. Oh,
There you go, Marty. Okay, good night,
Done.
everyone.
All right. so
good,
the sec-
Tanya.
Good night.
All right, good night, Tanya, thank you. The second order of committee reports. Every month was alphabetical. Aging first, youth last, every single month. Didn't seem fair to me, particularly in the old days when some people would leave in the middle of a meeting. You end up with a resolution coming up and there wasn't a full, what do you call it, the quorum to even pass it. So I started the rotating. So every month, a different committee was first, going in alphabetical order. We apparently clarified that for this coming month. I'm a little upset about that because in the era that was created, I was first this coming month, but now I'm not. Now I'm somewhere in the middle. But that's what we did. Now, voting options still seems to be a problem for some people. And it was a problem at the last meeting for an existing member of the board. So just a reminder, everyone has 4 options for voting. They can vote affirmative, they can vote negative. For a resolution to pass, it requires a majority +1 majority of those voting in the affirmative. If it doesn't have that number, it does not pass. If someone abstains, that's the third choice, someone abstains, that could prevent the majority from occurring, and therefore the resolution wouldn't pass. So even though you think that an abstention means you're not voting, in effect, you're voting against, because you're not allowing the vote for to take place. And finally, the fourth option, we used to call it incorrectly. And I'm sorry that I even put it in what we'll talk about later, the primer. I put in that we used to call it abstention with cause. That terminology is non-existent. We cannot use it. The terminology now is present ineligible to vote, meaning you have a conflict of interest that would make your vote biased one way or the other. And to prevent that from taking place, you are not allowed to vote. Not allowed to vote isn't the same as abstaining. So present and not eligible to vote. So for example, something obvious, if the item before the board was your house and we're voting on something about your house, then obviously you have a conflict of interest. And so your vote is null and you're present and eligible to vote. And even though I've said this and everyone understands it, somebody had a problem with the last meeting and we'll try and correct for that. And finally, open meetings law, which seems to be, I see a hand, but I'll get back in a second. There seems to be at present some concern about the appropriate implementation of the open meetings law and whether or not there are errors being made in not intentionally violating, but perhaps unintentionally violating. And we want to make sure that doesn't happen and that we all become expert in what it means. I do not at this point want to make it appear that I'm the expert, which I am not. So what I want to do is for next month's meeting, I want to dedicate as much time, if not the entire meeting, to a discussion of the open meetings law. And I will send out in the next day or so a copy of the law or a link to the law so everyone can read it. And Dan intends, and I appreciate it, he will be sending out some of the opinions he has come across concerning appropriate implementation. That's my report. And now I see David had his hand up.
Yes, Marty, stepping back to the voting options, it occurred earlier this week. If somebody's at the present at the beginning of a meeting and for whatever reason leaves the meeting before a vote is taken, what is its impact on the yay, nay counts?
If the person leaves the meeting and there's still a quorum, then whatever vote comes in, and you have majority of the quorum.
Okay,
If the person leaves the meeting and there is no quorum, then you're taking a census and not really a vote.
okay, very good, thank you.
Any other questions? Any other hands? Okay, review the May 2021 minutes, pending approval. And this is our chance to approve. I'm hoping everyone had, well, I don't know about Kelly. I hope everyone had a chance to review the minutes. And if there are any comments or suggestions that ought to be amended, please let us know. Is that your hand again, David, or you didn't put it down?
So sorry.
Any comments on the minutes?
I move to approve it.
Motion to approve, seconded.
I'll second.
Anyone disagree?
Marty, I don't think I was a member of the committee, right? At that point in time?
Well, you weren't absent.
I think you were a
and
member.
You are you were
Okay,
present.
I was a member. Okay, fine. I have no objection. Fine, done.
Oh, but you'll note, I gave you an asterisk.
Yep, but that's okay. We know even if you're absent from the meeting, you're allowed to read them. You're encouraged to read the minutes, and if there are any questions, to talk to you about them. And even if somebody is absent, they're free to vote in favor of the minutes, correct?
Correct, absolutely.
Okay, okay.
What
so-
I've done.
That's
Just a point of clarification, Marty. I mean,
Yes.
Rosemary, I agree with that, but I believe the rule is that, yeah, even if you were not a member of the committee at that point, you could still vote on them. I mean, you need to take appropriate steps to feel comfortable voting affirmatively, but I don't think the fact that you were not a member of the committee is a reason for you to not vote to approve the minutes.
Because I'm a member of the committee now? Is that
Well,
what
I
you're
mean,
saying, Ms. Paul?
Rosemary, for you, it's a non-issue because you were a member then. But
Got it.
I'm just hypothetically.
Well, for example, I was not a member back.
Okay. You're muted, David.
I'm sorry, I was not a member then, but I am now. So I would be an example.
Yes, and my understanding is that David, it would be acceptable for David to vote in favor of the minutes, even though he was not a member of the committee at that point.
Correct,
Okay,
correct. The same way as if you were absent.
right, same
You
thing.
need the best
Yeah.
judgment that the people who at the meeting and have no difficulty with it, you can go with their interpretation, their sense. Well, having said all of that, everyone is agree, is there anyone who disagrees with approving the minutes? They have been approved. Thank you. The next thing on the agenda was the COIB findings or settlements that came in that I shared with you. The first 2 or 3, we did, it looks for that previous year, last year. So this is old stuff. I just looked at dates and put them together, but to realize, I mean, those who are not having fun, that Chancellor took his wife on a Board of Ed and they challenged him. But I want you to hold that in mind when we get to the last item. Kelly, for yours, in case you are not aware, and stop me if you are, the Conflict of Interest Board oversees all activities for employees of the city, and for our operations and function as a member of the community board, we somehow fall into the same category. So when it comes to conflicts of interest or violations of ethics, COIB is very much concerned about what we do. How they get, who complains and how they get these cases, I don't know. We just, COIB shares with us, whenever they have a few of their findings. They tell us about the case. These summaries I take from them, but in addition to getting summaries, I also get, and if anyone wants to see, there is the full case outlay of who spoke, what they found, and why they came to these penalties as such. So these first two are from last year. Now you have, and what always amazes me, by the way, and the committee knows it, that there are people you think are absolute idiots, that they don't know that what they're doing is inappropriate. We get one to an attorney for the Board of Ed screwed up. So I wonder about things like that. So esteemed feeder supervisor, Division of Facilities Management, directed an on-duty DCAS subordinate to sign out for him, violation, and drive him, and keep that in mind, between his DCAS office in Lower Manhattan and his union office in Long Island City to handle a personal problem. Not a good thing. And they charged him, serve a 15 workday suspension and forfeit 5 days of annual leave. An associate investigator in the investigative unit office of the Department of Correction uses email account to send 3 emails and 1 DOC work hours asking recipients to vote for him to serve a vice president for his union. Not a good idea. And again, you'd think someone with that rank would know. Public warning letter to a teacher who used his DOE mail account to exchange 30 emails related to his private tutoring website. Not a good idea. And this is what I like. A teacher who's also an attorney was working for a private law firm representing plaintiffs in 9 civil rights suits against the city. The last line I bolded, the city's interest law prohibits a public servant from acting as an attorney against the city. Makes sense to me. Anyhow, you've had a chance to read this. I don't know that I have to go further. Any comments or thoughts on these?
Yeah, Marty.
Yes?
I am curious, and I've always wondered this kind of thing. Those 2 email account ones, clearly you can't use a city email address. But let's assume that they had their private email address, but they did it on their computer in their city office.
Technically, let me answer your question. Let me set up the answer before I answer it. I am not the final source. The final legal source is COIB. If anyone thinks they have a conflict of interest, it's to their advantage to contact COIB and say, this is what my problem is. What do you think? And they will give you the legal response to your questions. And they'll give it to you in writing. And for the most part, and I'm glad you raised this question. And for the most part, it's privileged information. So if you say to the committee, to say to the COIB, I have a problem, what do you think? Then I'll go one step further. You come to a vote and you say, either to yourself or to us, I'm present, ineligible to vote. You can be challenged. Why do you say that? And you can say, I contacted COIB and they told me I have a conflict. I can't vote. And that's the end of the discussion. So I just want to point that out. Now, going back to David's question, use of equipment is the same thing as receiving an email. So if you went to the board office and Xerox copies for your personal use, or or sat at the computer and used your own email address, it's the same thing. Again, I'm not the final authority. Then we come to this one, which I heard on TV this morning, and Rosemary was kind enough to share the DOI report. But if anyone remembers Hevesy, who went to jail for using his public vehicle to transport his wife wherever, and there were extenuating circumstances, but they didn't seem to care when it came to giving him prison time. So now we have the mayor who's been using his vehicle and police escort for his daughter, for his son, for his wife, for his presidential campaign. I don't know what Governor de Blasio will do when they find out about this. So I bring it to your attention. If you want, I will send to you the DOI report as per Rosemary sending it to me.
Yeah, I'd be curious to see it because I don't have a problem with the first one so much. The second one going up to New Haven, that seems way out of line.
You have no problem with the police department helping his daughter move?
To Gracie Mansion.
It's, and what it was, that's a twofer on that one. Not only did they use New York City vans and equipment, they used New York City police officers to move the furniture. I think that's a big no-no. And by the way, I recommend this, it's only 49 pages. It's a fascinating thing to read. It's just fascinating. I recommend. Did you enjoy it, Marty? I thought it was great fun.
I only briefly looked through it. I didn't have a chance to read it. But I just chuckled when I heard it on the news this morning and chuckled more so when I saw this.
Rosemary,
But David, if you read the last sentence, it gives you a better sense of what they're looking at.
Can you guys just tell us what the denouement was? Was he found responsible as having violated these conflict of interest rules?
By and large, they picked, as you see, they'll pick and choose, but by and large, Steve, yes, and he owes the city, the dollar amount isn't here, for the use of New York City police officers for his campaign. He owes New York City over $300,000, and he hasn't paid a penny, not a penny.
Wow.
And there's a lot of criticism against the police department. Some of the officers, when DOI tried to investigate, obstructed the investigation, hid evidence. There's a lot in this report, a lot. So there's a lot of fault to go around to a lot of people. But yes, by and large, the mayor has a big problem. He does here.
He has submitted an appeal to COIB.
Wow.
Well, this is
But
DOI.
this is a
This is not
serious
COI. This is higher than COIB.
Yep.
What's not here is what happened to the $1 million his wife allegedly used.
For what?
That's the question.
Oh, okay.
It's worth reading. It really is. It's worth reading.
Now, the item that I amended the agenda for came from the Borough President's office. And once again, this is an example of an abuse. If you remember last year or 2 years ago, there was a board chair in Brooklyn who bought a vehicle on city money. And then there was another chair who was using city money for a membership in a gym in Brooklyn, something about Brooklyn. So here you have, I have no idea, this is presumably a Bronx board, but I have no idea who they're talking about. But they use the board facilities to be able to do this GoFundMe page for a private charity. Good, bad, or indifferent, you cannot use for facilities. So when this came to me, I thought it was important that I share it and not sit on this valuable information. Any thoughts? And going back, by the way, David, the first item here was these city employees who use city vehicles for their own personal business.
Mhm.
And
Oh,
so
yeah,
how
yeah, no, I've got a
much more?
problem with that.
Well, how much more is it if the mayor uses police and city vehicles to move his daughter?
Into
Drive
Gracie
his-
Mansion. Well, let me
drive
give you a
his son to
slightly different,
Yale?
let me give you a slightly different hypothetical. Should the
Okay.
police be assisting the mayor to move from his residence into Gracie Mansion? I would think so.
Well,
I don't.
I'm gonna
Yeah,
look now
not
what
the
you mean by the
case.
word move. If move means you're there to protect my being, so when I go from place A to B, you're with me to protect me, that's one thing. If this is my dresser and I want you to carry it out for me, that's different.
Well, granted that we shouldn't be having cops move furniture, but let's assume that the cops were going along for protection and that the city paid movers of some sort to move the furniture. I would think that's actually appropriate. Now, the one with Dante to New Haven is ridiculous.
Okay, and how about his great presidential run?
I don't know. When Bloomberg ran, he was already out of office, right?
And had money to
Correct.
pay for himself.
Yeah, yeah. There's just so many odd rules about security details nationwide. I'm not sure it's wrong.
What you are
Only
convincing me
because-
of,
What?
what you're convincing me of is if I have a legal problem, I am not sure I want you to defend me.
Right.
I never claimed to be a lawyer, Marty. You just asked me the ethics of having a 24/7 security detail staying with the mayor 24/7 when he's not within the 5 boroughs. That's a policy issue. That's not a legal issue, I believe.
I recommend or commend you to read the report. It
Okay,
doesn't,
I will
Mhm.
send it.
I was distressed that it had no pictures, but so be it. All right, now the other item, what I leave out here. Okay, now, the other item I skipped so far, and I don't know if anyone's had a chance to look at the city council spreadsheet. A lot of it is from last year, because I took the entire year. And I didn't add new stuff, I just took the entire year. And I personally have not had a chance to go through all of it. I went through some of it and highlighted alphabetically the first few committees. So for Kelly's sake, I remind you again, the document is inordinate in terms of its size. It'll take you 100 pages to print it out if you so inclined. But if there are items of which you are interested in, it's there. I will continue and finish up my job, my desire to go through the whole thing and highlight things I think are important to me. Number of things I just mentioned off the top of my head, and many I think you're aware of. The city council is extremely concerned about the deliverers, food deliverers, and how they're being treated or mistreated. Things like a new law to make sure that the owner of the establishment or the service arranges for toilet facilities along the way, that there's discussion of how long they work, how far they have to go. I mean, a lot of this makes sense. You can feel the difficulty and pain that many of these people who take the job of delivery, what they've been going through. So it's been in the press a lot. What's also of interest to me is all the articles, all the introductions and so on concerning Rikers Island. And I'm sure you're all been aware of what's been going on there, which is not good. And it's interesting that that's what they did. Associated with that, there's a piece about the, was it not Block Island? The island in the East River where
The paupers' graves are?
Pope is right. I don't know. I don't
Oh, Hard Island.
Hard Island.
Hard
Hard
Island.
Island, yes.
That's it. Okay. Hart Island has been transferred responsibility no longer from corrections, and now I think went to parks.
Yes.
And the difference is supposedly that now there'll be a better opportunity for people to visit there. I don't know what they see there. There are no markers, but
Graves.
well, there are graves, but whose grave is whose?
Well,
For example, stillborn children.
yeah, what they'll be doing is having sort of a general marker, like this is plot 7, but there are 6 caskets underneath.
Well,
They're quite stacked.
the big difference here, of course, is that the fact that Parks Department will set up, they use the word tours, I believe, set up schedule so that people will have the opportunity to go out. They did not have the opportunity under the Department of Corrections. And one thing, Sylvia, that I found of major interest to me was that the Department of Corrections wants to establish some kind of protocol so that they can check on the condition of the dyslexia amongst the prisoners. I find that interesting because if the schools had found that earlier, these people might not be there in the first place. So, as I say, I find that interesting. So I commend you again to look at it. I will do a better job in highlighting things I find interesting. I also note to you, which I put for the first time in this cover letter, that if you look down the committees in alphabetical order, you may fail to note that a number of these committees have subcommittees, and those are listed at the bottom. So they aren't with the main committee. I will resort this one and also from henceforth, so that the subcommittees are in the same block. I went blank again. But that's okay. Oh, there it's back again.
You're back.
Okay, so I will henceforth put them in the same grouping. So the committee and the subcommittee are together. Now, there are 2 other issues were on the agenda. One I have under old business, one under new business, but in theory, they're the same thing. The first one was brought up by David last May. And his concern was whether or not the nominating committee has an obligation to inform the full board that another candidate has put him or herself forward for a particular office. I do this again, I apologize for Kelly's benefit. In case you're not aware, we have what we do in the board is that in May, we vote for a nominating committee. No, we don't. Is it March? In March, we vote for a nominating committee, and a full board votes for the 5 or whatever number they select to be on the committee. The committee then goes and puts out 2 notices. Notice number one is that every position on the board, and this is annual, every position on the board, be it the officers, the 4 officers, or any of the, or all of the chairs of committees, all of them are considered vacant. Nobody has vested rights to be chair of X forever, so it's vacant. And then there's an opportunity for individuals to present themselves and saying, I'd like to be nominated for X committee or X officership. The nominating committee interviews or doesn't interview, or they probably interview if someone is new and wants a particular position, may not interview if someone is uncontested for position they have been holding. But the nominating committee then comes back with its slate of officers saying, this is what we recommend the board to vote on. The question was raised that, well, during the course of this, I may decide I want to be nominated on the slate for a certain chair position. And the nominating committee doesn't nominate me. What I believe that, and please correct me, David, what I believe David was looking for is whether or not the nominating committee ought to tell the entire board that person A, person B also wants to be the chair of this committee, but was not selected by the slate, elected for the slate. What happened before is that we didn't pursue the fact that there were vacant positions. And if you didn't know that I was choosing not to return as chair of you might not want to run against me for chair of LRE, but if you knew that I was not taking the position, you might self-nominate. So the idea was to encourage people to do that. And that's why you advertise the role vacant. So the question I think I have, David, and please correct me now, if another candidate wants to be the chair of or an officer of, then David thinks the nominating committee ought to advise the board that that's the case. We recommend X, but Y and Z also wanted it. Do I have it, David?
Plus the other side of the coin, you are right. The other side of the coin is simply for transparency reasons. If you decide you want to run and as far as you know, no one else is interested in the role, you may say, I'm not going to bother with an interview. But if you know that somebody else is now interested in the chair, you might change your mind and then go through an interview to impress the committee, with your thoughts about it. So it's just a transparency thing, frankly. Everybody should know what is going on. Nothing should be hidden.
Marty, I think there another aspect of this, but I'm a little hazy in recalling the exchange between David and Julie at the meeting. I think that when David asked the question, it was retrospective. In other words, it was really just, I'm curious, and there's no reason that information shouldn't be shared. But I think the more important point is whether the information is available to the board, beforehand. And my vague recollection is that in the past, the committee, at least in the 2 years I was involved, put out the schedule for interviews.
And
But I could be misremembering this. And that, of course, would make it clear who was, interviewing for what role. But otherwise, I don't think there was a formal notice other than the notice that said, and I don't know that this is what's being disputed here, the notice that went out to inform the board which positions were open. That, I think, has been done, whether or not it's in the ethical guidance manual. And by open, I mean whether or not the incumbent is seeking to continue in the role or not. And I think David explained why that was, or you explained why that was important. to make it clear to people that it may be time to step up and fill a role that's otherwise not filled.
Any other comments? Thoughts?
I think Steve's point is very well taken in that there is a distinction between a position being open and being vacant. You know, I mean, because they're all open. We say that all the time, right? They're open. Everything, every year, every position is open. It's like, you know, going before a criminal court jury and saying innocent till proven guilty. You have to keep saying it. And we do keep saying every position is open, but the distinction here is it's vacant. There's no, I mean, I think that's an important fact. It's vacant.
Right.
It's a different distinction than open, but anyway.
The reason in
Vacant
the
as
real
well
world,
as having competitive applicants, multiple
it's not-
applicants.
Right.
yeah, it's not just the competitive.
Somebody else wanted to
I think
speak?
Part of it, if I just one more point, Marty, part of it is that, let's say somebody's been in the role for 3 years and is doing a great job. And there's no indication, or there is an indication that that person is willing to continue to serve and, you know, has so indicated. Because now the manual is very clear that existing people who are holding the offices of officer or chair of a committee must indicate whether they affirmatively are seeking to continue or that they are not. And the reason that's important outside of any sort of competition is that if a role, if an office or a chairmanship is going to otherwise go unfilled, then someone else on the board may say, well, Bob Bender's been doing a great job as the Parks Chair, but now I know he's not going to be the Parks Chair next year. Right now, that means the committee doesn't have anyone immediately, obviously wants to continue. I'll offer my services and go and get interviewed by the nominating committee. And that's very important for the continuation of the board's work.
Yes.
Dan, I see your hand.
Yep. Can you hear me?
I hear you.
Oh,
Yes.
there we go. So yeah, you know, there's one more distinction to make, and you know, it's notable. You know, in the case of, let's say it's Bob Bender, as Steve was saying, Bob Bender's running, you know, for this chair position again. Bob's doing a great job. I'm not going to run against Bob. It's not a vacant seat. I like Bob. There's somebody, you know, who's good for the position, and I don't see myself running against Bob Bender.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just, I mean, when it comes down to it, I think that's what most, you know, people are doing. I'm not going to run against Dan for aging. I'm not going to run against, you know, David for budget. That's what a lot of it comes down to. And I think it's an important part of, you know, when we constructed these rules. And I remember doing it with Marty, and I remember you leading the charge on this years back with the notification process of 5 days. You know, it's so that way people know whether or not the incumbent chair is running and whether or not they're running against that individual, so to speak. So I think it's an important part of it.
But isn't, I'm
Go
sorry.
ahead. Paul, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I just saw Camelia had her hand up. I don't want to.
Oh, Camelia?
Oh, I'm not a member of the committee, but I don't know if you like allow me to. Can I? Yeah, okay. No, just to point out to the sort of to what Dan said. Please be mindful also of the fact that when some of these rules and procedures were drafted, maybe some of them quite a number of years ago, because we do have a good number of board members that have been there for very, very long time. This was before the latest revision of the charter that says that board members can be there for 8 years, followed by a mandatory pause of 2 years. So all of a sudden, there's not the endless time frame of, oh, I really like this person, let them be in that position for the eternity. So all of a sudden, there's a clock ticking, and if somebody feels like they, you know, it's an opportunity for them to contribute and provide useful and positive contribution to the board, they may want to challenge a chair, simply because, again, there's a limited time frame that we have on our hands. So just wanted to point that as a fact to, to advocate for as much transparency as possible. There's nothing, if we have the information, let everybody know the information, sort of say. Thank you.
Paul?
If I just want to make sure I understood, David, your point was that transparency about who was interested in the position other than the incumbent chair, right?
Who, anyone, incumbent chair, not an incumbent chair.
Oh, well,
It-
I mean, the incumbent,
Transparency, it should be blanket.
yeah, but we
There should
already
be
know
no
about
restrictions here.
we already have provision for being informed about the intentions of the incumbent chair,
Okay,
don't we? I mean, what it seems like the gap that you're focusing on is the intentions of anyone else who's interested
enough.
in the position, right?
fair
And
enough.
just so I understand what you're proposing, is it to be aware of their interest during the nominating committee process or after the nominating committee has finished and as part of their report, or
The
both?
former.
The former.
Yeah,
Okay.
and well, actually, I think it should be both. I mean, I think it's in transparency. If I run for chair and somebody challenges me for chair and I lost, well, I think it's fair that people know that I lost and Smith won.
Well, it's not about winning or losing. It's about whether you got the nominating committee.
Yeah. Fair enough. You're right.
I mean, the only point I was making before was that as a practical matter, de facto, it had been disclosed in the past simply because the interview schedules got posted. And
True.
part of the reason the interview schedules got posted was it was understood to be part and parcel of an agenda. When I say used to be, I mean, this is since the open meetings interpretation. It used to be closed door. But when this became an open meeting, these meetings were noticed, and it was in the agenda that X, Y, and Z are being interviewed at this meeting. And then if Bob Press wanted to come to the meeting, he would. But seriously, it was publicized. And that was the problem last spring when David asked the question. He was really asking a question that normally that information would have been public as part of the agenda of those meetings. And I think that was the difference of opinion that I would say I had, I think, with Marty and with Julie at the time, that there was no obligation to disclose it, but it was in the normal course of things, except last year, because Julie didn't send out that nature of an agenda, in the normal course of things that had been disclosed in the past. That's all.
I want to summarize, and please tell me if I'm wrong, David, since you brought it up. I frankly don't see the difference. The issue is, and as recapped by Dan, when the notice goes out, and Steve, when the notice goes out, those who wish, first of all, you're told positively, you have to tell us you want to remain in the position. You want to be considered by the nominating committee. And if you don't tell us, we're just going to tell the rest of the board that you're not seeking the position. Having said that, as Steve points out, anyone who wants to vie for any position is now public information because it's open. And the notification goes out. The following people are being interviewed for I don't know if it says for the following positions, but they're being interviewed. So if someone is curious and the slate comes out and I see the X was interested and interviewed and wasn't picked, then I would know automatically that that person was not selected. More importantly, at the board meeting, when the slate the slate's already been published, when the vote comes up, anyone, whether they applied for the slate or didn't apply for the slate, has the right to stand up and say, I wish to be nominated, I wish to be considered as a candidate for X position. So if that person was previously asked to be on the slate and was turned down, you now know this person wants the position. So the only thing that bothers me, and is where it comes down to, is that I don't know whether or not it benefits anyone for the nominating committee to publish a negative slate. The following people wanted to be considered, and we turned them down. Here is the bad list. I don't think that's appropriate or necessary.
Okay, or let me invert it a little bit then. Take it out of the nominating committee and just simply say the board should publish a list of those people who are interested in X, Y, or Z officer or chair positions.
For what purpose?
Transparency. That there were 7 people who were interested in being chair of the Health and Hospitals Committee. I don't know. I don't care. It's transparent that there was a great deal of interest on that one, but not interest in another one. It's a fact. It's transparent. I'm not trying to get into who the nominating committee liked or didn't like. I think this has moved far afield. I think really it's just a straight out issue of transparency. The following people were candidates for office, so to speak, which is true with across city government. If you submit all the paperwork and you have a certain funding and blah, 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 you are identified as a candidate for office. If you state that you're interested in becoming the X officer or Y chair, we as a board should inform the other board members as well as the community that Smith and Jones are interested in chairing the Health and Hospitals Committee.
I'm glad you didn't say Smith and Wesson.
Yes, I know. And that only Johnson was interested in the Environment Committee.
Haven't we met the test of transparency by publishing the list of those who wish to be the interview list?
No, not necessarily, because that's the nominating committee and you don't have to be interviewed.
All right, I would like, well, if there's a challenge for a chair, you have to be interviewed.
Okay.
If I want to apply for budget committee, then the nominating committee is obligated to interview you and me, and those
Okay.
names are published. I'd like to bring this to a close and ask for a sense, I'll call it census.
Rosemary has her hand up.
Rosemary?
I am so sorry. I just want one point, Marty, if you don't mind. It's something that Camelia brought up, and I think it is important. Term limits is a game changer for our board and all its members. It changes everything. No member can sit back and make a decision whether to run or not, say, oh, I'll run in 10 years. There are no 10 years. There's no 9 years. For most of us sitting here, there isn't even 8 years. It's an important decision. It would be my hope, and I'm not saying we take any action on it, but I want to double down on what Camelia said. This is important, and I hope in April, the same way that we hammer away, every seat is open, every seat is open. I hope, well, some of us will say a mantra that please note term limits should be in your consideration as you consider whether to run for an office or not. It is a game changer and has to be in everybody's mind. I'm sorry. Camelia, I agree with what you said, and it deserves repeating. Thank you, Marty. I'm sorry I interrupted your finale. I'm sorry.
Well, I'd like to take a census of the committee to see whether or not you believe we ought to make a change, or what presently exists is adequate. So let me start from my list here, work backwards. Omar, change or leave it?
What's the change, Marty?
Transparency, to put out the list of all the applicants prior to the June meeting when the vote takes place.
I guess what you're really saying is whether it should be mandated as a part of the report of the nominating committee.
Yes,
That's the specific
Yeah.
question, I think.
yes. That's the question.
Okay, sorry.
Well,
Omar,
I'm
thank
really
you.
saying, I think it should be put out before the nominating committee actually conducts their interviews. And that should be a board function, not a nominating committee function.
Okay, if that's a suggestion, we'll work with that. That when names come in of people who wish to be interviewed, that the board needs to be notified. I'll start again. Omar, do you think that's a necessary change? Omar?
Come back to me, Marty.
Why did I know you'd say that? Sylvia?
I think that we've covered it very comfortably and should be accepted the way it was.
Okay, no change.
No change.
Okay, Sylvia, no. Next, working up. Kelly, you're new, your first vote.
No change. I actually like the process. I did participate or listen in on some of the nominating committee calls. So I like the process.
Thank you for your input. Lisa?
Yeah, I'd like to see all of the names announced beforehand. And actually, I'd like to see it both at the June meeting for the, candidates, but also when there's an opening in mid-season. I'd like to see the names announced. So it's just
get to
out in the open
mid-season.
for everybody to see.
We'll get to mid-season next.
Okay?
That's the next item on the agenda.
Okay.
Steve?
Subject to my understanding that if things are done correctly under board procedures, all of the interviewees will be publicized because the schedule of interviews will be publicized as part of the agenda of each nominating committee meeting. If that is taken as a given, I don't think there's any need to change the procedures to include successive notices every time someone indicates interest in the position.
But it didn't happen.
Oh,
last
hold
time.
on.
And that's why I
David?
said what David, that's why I said what I said. It didn't happen because someone made a mistake and didn't follow.
Oh, okay.
That's
All
my
right. I didn't know you defined it as a mistake. Sorry.
That's only my
Dan?
view. That's just my view.
Dan?
Oh, I don't agree with the change being recommended.
Okay, Rosemary?
I think I feel like Lisa, I think beforehand, but we do the announcement of the interviews and everything. I think it's good that the names are out there ahead of time. I am sensitive to, and I think Marty, you use the issue of afterward, it looks like here's the winner and here's the list of the losers. I find that offensive and unnecessary. The beforehand, the listing of the interviews and that, perfectly fine. That's the way I would, if you're counting that, leaving it there, that's fine. Afterward, I agree with you, Marty. It has a sense of here are the winners, here are the losers, and it's not good. It's not good for our neighbors and our friends on the board. Not good.
So now I'm confused. Yes or no to the change?
Well, I'm in favor of it, of there being transparency and beforehand. If that is what exists now, then leave it the way it is, okay?
David?
I'm a little confused too, because it's this definition, it has gone back and forth across the line. However, if we make it clear to the nominating committee that all candidates will be published beforehand, I'm okay with keeping it.
I'm a
That's
little
a big
confused,
if.
Marty.
Okay, Paul?
Given that the information is already out there, I don't see a need for a change.
And me, I don't see a need for a change. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I count
You wanna
6.
come back to me,
No.
Marty?
Oh, I'm sorry, Omar.
No
You were
change, it's
first.
fine. No change, it's fine, it's way it is.
Okay, thank you. So there's 7 no's and 1, 2, 3 yeses. So,
All right, can I ask a question?
excuse me? Who spoke up?
It's Lisa. I'm confused. See, I don't know where it's anywhere documented that everyone will know who is going to be scheduled for an interview, who raised an interest in running for an office. If it's not documented, is that the policy?
The board sends out a schedule.
But that's once it's already
Interviews.
scheduled. The question is, so the schedule is already fixed at that time. Is there a list that goes out before? Steve said that it should have happened, that the list of people who raised an interest.
Lisa, I'm sorry if I wasn't clear. I was only saying that what should have happened is that for each meeting that was an interview meeting
Mhm.
and whatever other business, there should have been a schedule sent around so that it was understandable that people were interviewing on that particular day.
Right,
Oh, okay.
right.
Is
Okay.
everyone else seeing the screen disappear, or is that just my,
Just
Sure.
you.
okay?
I still have my thing up.
Yeah, his agenda's still up there. I think we could make it easy by just simply recommending that the board publish a list of all individuals interested in positions beforehand, before the nominating committee does its scheduling.
At
That's
this moment,
factual and transparent.
at this moment, I've taken the census of the committee, 7 no's, 3 yeses. And so for this year, we're not going to make any recommendation. I suggest that everyone keep their antenna up for the process this year to see if we met David's request, if there's transparency or not. And I'd like to leave it there. Following up on Lisa's, what she wanted to bring up, which is on the agenda, there is concern that the process we have used with respect to midterm vacancies may have flaws in it. And so the question is how to make that a better system. What happens now or doesn't happen now is that when someone resigns a position, for whatever reason, leaves the board, whatever, the board is notified that X has resigned the position is open, and people are invited to apply, to express their interest. Bottom line, I'll skip the middle. The bottom line is that after 2 months of a vacancy, or up to 2 months, there must be a vote by the board to fill that vacancy. So there will be 2 positions up this month, one for secretary and one for chair of the Parks Committee. So that's the end. Now, the question is what happens in the middle? The middle to this point has been when someone comes to the offices or whomever and like it, then what generally happens is that the office will put out a note that Jane Doe is, or Smith Wesson, whatever his name is, would love to have this position, and that person will be up for a vote at the appropriate board meeting. The question that's being raised is, should there be an intermediate situation where individuals who wish to be considered have a date to contact the office. So when the office puts out a notice, X is interested, it should be X and Y and Z are interested. And you know, because the impression given is that if the name X comes out, then there is presumption it's a done deal and nobody else is going to seriously apply. So having said that, any comments?
Could I ask a comment? Could I make a comment?
Sylvia?
There are
Yes.
two positions that are open. One of them has been shared with us for one position. The other one, nothing has been said. Supposedly the vote is on Tuesday, and we have not been informed on anything. I think there's a flaw there.
Well, the flaw could be that nobody came forward yet, and someone gets drafted at Tuesday's meeting. But the issue is not the name hasn't come out. The question is, should a name have come out at all? Anybody else?
Dan
Yeah,
has
Marty,
his
if I-
hand up.
Dan,
Hey,
yeah,
Marty.
your hand is up.
So, look, I think this is an important topic, and thank you for putting it on the agenda tonight. For me, it comes back, and I think it's a great, kind of corollary to what we were just discussing about the nominating committee. So when it comes to these midterm vacancies, and I think you kind of framed it, in a good way as well. If any names are going to go out, and look, there's many reasons why names should go out prior to the date of the election. I think it should all be at the same time, or given a period of time where more folks can actually digest it and think about it, or we just don't put any names out, whatever that timing is. Because for this purpose, when you put out an election and the very next day you put out a name of somebody who's interested, you have a chilling effect on other members, because you get back into that conversation before. It's much different running against an incumbent or running against somebody who put their name out than it is to run for a vacant position. So if there were, say, I'm just making it up, if there were a 10-day period after the notice, or a 5-day period like we do for incumbents after the notice of vacancy, it gives a little bit of time for people to think about it and put their name into the office without having to have this chilling effect of running against somebody else. And again, for me, the time period, it's something I think is a good discussion for this committee. But I think there's a problem, when an election is called and very shortly thereafter, you see a name out there of somebody. I think it's bad optics, whether or not, anything is going on. I think it's bad optics. And I think we need a little bit of a leeway time to give folks the ability to say, you know what, I do want to run for that position. I'm interested in running for that position. Please put my name in. And that way, all the names are going out at the same time. And I think that's just, something that we should think about. And I think it might be a good practice. And I open it up for committee discussion, just because it's a different election when you see a name, because then you're running up against that person.
Bob?
Marty, I'm not a member of the committee. I just want to make that clear. So will you permit me to speak?
I'll let Camelia speak.
Okay, thank you. It seemed to me the entire thrust of the discussion that we just had was about transparency, about getting information out to everybody about vacant positions and who's interested in applying for those positions. It seems to me counterintuitive that if a position becomes available, if a position is open and somebody quickly expresses his interest in that position or her interest in that position, that we somehow penalize that level of enthusiasm by saying, well, sorry, you just responded too quickly. I mean, if the committee wants to set up a process whereby when there are interim vacancies prior to the June board election, where let's say X amount of time goes by after a vacancy is announced, to allow people the opportunity to come forward, let's say nobody, names will be announced after 10 days. I think that's a worthwhile discussion for the committee to have, how it wants to organize this process so that, so that there is a consistent way to do it. But it seems to me, if there's an open position and somebody immediately expresses his or her interest in it, and if I'm interested in that position, I don't see why I would suddenly say, oh, so-and-so is interested in it, I guess I won't apply. If I really want that position, I should apply too. And I'm not a very good candidate if somebody else steps forward and I decide, oh, okay, I'll just fold my cards and not apply. So, it seems to me that the whole argument for transparency is put the information out there, make it available, let people decide at that point what they want to do. But as I say, if you want to formalize that process in some way, I think that's an appropriate thing for the committee to do. Thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody else?
You want to call on me, Marty, or I see other hands? Is it okay if I
Go ahead.
go?
Rosemary,
Okay.
go. Dan didn't put down his hand.
Oh, no, I was gonna speak again after everybody else got to.
Bob did put down.
Just to
his
clarify
hand.
something. Yep.
And can whoever has their, can people mute
Rosemary, your turn.
themselves?
Rosemary, you're up.
Thank you. This is something that has always bothered me, that the first person in the ring, well, they have a right to do it, and that has been the practice. I mean, I was chair for 3 years, and if a name came in, I put it out. I understand it, but somehow it does bother me that the other people sitting back, the other community board members sitting back, and remember, I'm going to harken back to term limits on board members. This is a serious and a game changer for our board, term limits. Those who are sitting back, younger members, look and say, here's my choice. Do I run for that seat that is vacant, or do I run against Mr. Smith? That's my choice. Am I going to run against Mr. Smith or run for the vacant seat? Somehow, it's the elephant in the room. You can't get rid of it. It bothers me, especially if within 24 hours a name is out there. That's when we have 2 months. Let's remember this. The bylaws, and Marty, I said this to you how many times? This is the smartest bylaws. I love our bylaws. Gives us 2 full months to consider filling a vacancy outside of the nominating committee thing. So it troubles me that names very quickly have, especially the younger members, look and say, am I going to run against, or it bothers me. So if there were a time limit, and I don't know what the appropriate time limit would be, but somehow some period to think, so that members can think about whether they want to run for those seats, seems to me eminently appropriate. And there is no lack of transparency by giving some term period. And God knows it's not penalizing the person who has already made up their mind to run. They're not penalized, they're going to run. It troubles me. And I think if there were some time period, I think that would be a good thing. I mean, Lisa, thank you for raising this. This is something that's bothered me for a long time, but sorry. Thank you, Marty. Thank you for your time.
And we'll thank Judge Friedlander for doing the bylaws.
Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Dan? You're muted.
And
Your
Oh,
words
yeah,
of
I just
wisdom
wanted
are
to,
being missed.
yep. Thanks. I just wanted to follow up on some of the comments made before by another member, and that was, we should be transparent in this process. All I'm saying is put the names out after some period of time. Because at that point, it's not like you're running against one person. And the truth is, I don't know that there is any rush to get names out immediately. And that's kind of the point, making this a process where if somebody is interested, they're not running against someone, they put their name into the office. And if later down the road, they have their hat in and there's 3 people running, they can choose what they want to do. But let's not create a chilling effect. And that's what I think it's about. Look, names being out, I don't remember. I think I probably did put names out when I was the chair to fill a vacancy. So I'm probably, guilty of the same. I just think if we're spending this time right now, and I think the term limits brought up by Camelia and Rosemary is an important distinction as well. You know, let's create more opportunities for folks to get involved, especially folks who are out there, you know, a year, 2 years.
Thank you, Kelly.
Hi, thank you. As the newest member of this committee and as one of the newer members of the board, I was a bit surprised that the announcement came almost immediately that someone had put their name in the ring. So I am very much in support of having a time limit, let's say 2 weeks or 10 business days, however we would like to frame it, where individuals have an opportunity to actually think about it, because it is something that individuals have to consider, and it should not be a decision that's made in haste. And it gives people the opportunity to, you know, think about it and move forward.
Thank you. Paul?
I think this is probably a good change that's being proposed, but I guess but at the same time, the notion that there are bad optics in a name coming out right away, I don't know, that doesn't get me too far. I mean, that's in the nature of how, you know, the political process works. You know, when a seat is open, people throw their names in the ring. Some are earlier, some are later. The optics don't trouble me particularly. And it doesn't particularly trouble me if someone who's enthusiastic, you know, puts their name up first. I mean, yes, there may be a chilling effect to some extent, but I don't necessarily regard it as, it doesn't shock the conscience that a name comes out early. You know, I mean, someone's interested, they put their name up. God bless. You know, I mean, to me, I think that's generally a good thing. Having said that, I do agree that in the nature of the board dynamics, with your members who have been around for quite a while and members who are younger, I think all in, yes, there is a benefit to giving some time, you know, so everyone has a few days to think about it and see who's interested. And before the names are released. So, you know, although I don't agree exactly with the premise as it's put forward, I do agree that that I think it's a good change.
David, last speaker.
Okay. I think that that the transparency and the optics play well with each other. I mean, if Smith decides day one that she wants to run for the position, and Jones doesn't get to it for another week, okay, well, that's a fact. The only thing that we have to be careful is it should never be announced by the chair. And I don't think this happened in the case of the secretary, but I think it would be bad if the chair announced that someone resigned. Oh, and by the way, within the hour or in the same breath, say that this other person wants to run for that position. That would be sort of inside information, but I don't think that's happened. And just another thing to keep in mind is, let's not over analyze this thing. In my tenure, I think there have been 75 or 100 officers and chairs, and I can only think of a handful, maybe a dozen, that there were competitors for the seats. So I think the process has been good. You know, maybe limiting the time frame in which you can submit your name, okay. But you know, if somebody submits early and somebody submits late, that's a criterion that board members can consider. So, thank you.
All right, having heard the input, it's my feeling that we agree that there should be a calendar set up, and when people can self-nominate and when people have to get the names in by. And if that's the consensus of the committee, which I think it is, there's no rush. What's happening now is happening. But for the next meeting, I'll sneak it in somewhere in the open meetings law. I'll give you a draft of some wording that that we can consider.
Marty, can I
And
just raise a
We'll
point
make
of
a move from
information?
there.
Just a point of information, is the suggestion that there be a time limit for putting one's name in or a calendar for that? What about the principle that elections allow for nominations from the floor?
That's always in play. I think the idea is, and I go back to the word chill, if you know that day 5, names have to go in, and day 10, using numbers arbitrarily, that's when the name or names will be published, then you know you have to move within a certain period of time, but that does not prevent anyone from getting self-nominated from the floor or doing their own campaigning before the next meeting.
Okay,
All this does is to eliminate this impression that when a name comes out prematurely, everyone else just puts their hands down and says, forget about it, it's done. I'll call on Camelia in a second. Is there anyone on the committee who has a problem with my suggestion? Okay, so for the next meeting, I will bring back a draft of wording and we'll play with it from there. Camelia?
Yes, it's another new business, if I may, Marty, if you close this
I'd
item.
like to finish this first.
Okay, I'll wait then.
All right. So, having forestalled Camelia, I can now call on her because new business.
Great guy, no old business.
Yes, thank you, thank you. So it's something that kind of came to my attention and I wanted to refer for your collective wisdom, advice and experience with respect to the matter of the special committees. And I did make sure to review the bylaws before even asking this question. So essentially, when a special committee is being formed, it's formed at the discretion of the chair with board vote, but then in subsequent years, it's resolutions that have to be put forward and approved in June by the committees. I had a situation, for example, for example, this last year, the day prior to full board vote, there was a land use committee, so they had like 4 large resolutions. They were not written. Also, the resolutions to renew the special committees were not written when we did the big voting in full board. So, for example, now when the office asked at the beginning of the year again, who wants to apply for what committee, I said, can I be a member of the special committee on the Greenway? And the answer was no, because you were not in the resolution essentially. But again, the resolution was not written. There was never any kind of outreach to say, hey, any new members want to join any of the special committees? And think about it, for a brand new member whose first meeting would have been this September, they never had the opportunity to join they were never invited or had the opportunity to practically join a special committee. And again, for the SCREV, for the special committee on racial equity, I understand for last year because it was, by chair discretion. But for the other committee, for example, and I just want for curiosity to check on the special committee on the Greenway. I mean, for 6 years, or if not even more, I got bored to open all the meetings there. 6 years, it never changed. Only those 3 members. I mean, if a member has an interest to join, when is that opportunity, the appropriate opportunity to join? I mean, do other members have the opportunity to reject a member that wants to join a committee, or how? Yes. Yeah, that's my question. Yeah.
I've asked.
Yes, you said somebody said yes.
Yeah.
I don't know where. Did you understand my question? Like for a brand new member, I mean, that wants to if I was a person that just joined right now in September Community Board 8, how would I join if I want to any of the special committee? Because in the moment you say the existing members of special committees have the prerogative of rejecting any new member, then all of a sudden you kind of have two classes of members. Or alternatively, if you tell me it's the chair's discretion, then that cannot be argued with. The chair decided this will be the members, period. So I'm asking for clarification as far as on this issue.
Well, you're raising two separate issues. Issue number one is the borough president seems to have been somewhat late this year in appointing new members. So they didn't come in till the middle of September, which kind of, you're right, new members didn't have the opportunity, but new members weren't on the board yet. I've always found it distressing that a new member becomes a member in June and has to vote on officers, and they have the vaguest idea of who the people are on the board yet. So that's one issue you've raised, and whether or not they had the opportunity or could have had the opportunity had they been named earlier. That's an important issue. The second issue is whether or not, and we can talk about it, after we finish next month with the open meetings law, if we have time, we'll start that, or we'll start the month after that. The question is, right now, most of the appointment of members of special committees rests with the chair. I don't think any of us want to or should wrest that power away from the chair, but it's worth talking about.
Having said that, there is a resolution being passed every year, which assumes that the committee puts forward a resolution where it says, and our members next year will be XYZ person.
Yeah, I agree with you. That's how it is. And special committees cease to exist in June unless they're renewed. And most of those resolutions have names attached to it. But again, I will put it on the agenda. If not, if there's no room next month, it'll be the month after.
Many thanks, many thanks.
So I finished my agenda. Just note, I hope I got my calendar right. November 15th would be our regular meeting. And somehow I think November 16th is election day.
No,
No, so I'm wrong. So November 15th, no discussion, that's it. So it's the second Monday of the month. And arithmetic is bothering me. 15 is one more than possible
yeah,
with my calendar.
yeah, I think it's the fourth, it's the fourth.
Hold on. How did I mess up here? November, oh, it's the 8th. It's not the 15th, it's the 8th. And the 9th would be,
No.
election day is the second Tuesday or the first Tuesday?
The first.
It's first Tuesday.
It's on the second.
It's November 2nd.
Yes, the first Tuesday
Okay.
after the first Monday.
So I am incorrect. So I'm correcting myself right now. The next meeting is on November 8th,
Okay,
not the 15th. November 8th. The meetings are usually held the second Monday of the month, first Monday now being land use. And I personally, I don't know, and I mentioned it to Jeff Dinowitz at the last meeting, I'm particularly fond of these Zoom meetings, especially since the last meeting I would have gone to before it was changed was during the hurricane, and I'm certainly glad I didn't have to go out that night.
we probably would not have gotten home.
I'd still be on the Major Deegan, who knows? So I don't know what I think the open meetings law, getting back to that, I have no problem and support the concept of the open meetings law. And I do believe that attendance at Zoom meetings far exceeds attendance at regular meetings. And so if the objective is to have the outside world see what's going on, this gives them a better opportunity. In addition, personally, since I was ill at the beginning of the COVID crisis, I didn't have COVID, but at the COVID crisis, I wouldn't have been able to make half the meetings, if not more than that. So I attended. I was glued to my seat, but I was attending. So just my thought randomly. Any final comments? The only thing I'm missing is what do you call it, refreshments to be able to share with everybody.
Yeah, Marty, I agree with you. I think we've got a reprieve through January 15th or 31st. But,
Correct.
you know, I think for law, rules, and ethics, I think it'd be appropriate for us to make a statement to the effect of what you just said, encouraging Zoom going forward after January. For the reasons that you said, particularly.
Okay, so I will also provide a draft, something to talk about at the next meeting. So is anyone has nothing to do, I'll stay on all night. Otherwise, I'll accept the motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Say good night, Gracie.
All right, Gracie, good night, and see George in the morning.
Bye.
Thank you. Take
Good night,
care.
Hopefully
everyone.
not.
Good night.
Bye all. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, Marty. Take care.